I pushed open the door to my bedroom and froze. Two men in paint-spattered overalls were covering my peach-colored walls with thick brushes. My floral curtains lay in a heap on the floor. My dresser had been moved to the middle of the room with cans of dripping paint sitting on top of the lacquered wood I'd restored myself. Ethan, my 35-year-old son, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, grinning as if he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Beside him, Ava, my daughter-in-law, was scrolling on her phone with that smug expression she got when she thought she'd won. The brush in the air froze when they saw me. The younger painter Baum looked at me with an uncomfortable expression, as if I'd interrupted something private. The smell of fresh paint made me dizzy, mixing with the rage that was starting to boil in my chest. "What's the meaning of this?" My voice came out thinner than I wanted. I'd just gotten home after working a 12-hour shift in the kitchen of the cookery, a place I'd spent 15 years preparing meals for families, celebrating birthdays while I scalded my fingers on boiling oil. My feet ached in my worn shoes. My back protested from the hours bent over the stoves, but none of that mattered now. Ava looked up from her phone and gave me that fake sweet smile she used when she wanted something. "Oh, Mom, you're home early. We're just making a few changes before we move in." Her voice was casual, as if she was commenting on the weather. Ethan straightened up and walked toward me with that confident air that had always intimidated me. "Mom, we wanted to surprise you. You know, this room is too big for just you, and we need more space. The kids are growing, and our apartment is just too small." My legs started to tremble. 20 years working in that brutal kitchen to save every single dollar that would let me buy this house. 20 years breathing grill smoke, enduring rants from cranky customers, scrubbing grease until late hours, all to have a place that was mine, where I could rest without having to ask anyone for permission. The older painter coughed uncomfortably. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, we can stop and come back tomorrow." No, keep going." Ava waved her hand as if she owned the place. "We've already paid. Might as well finish today." "Paid? With what money?" Asked myself. But I already knew the answer. The money I had lent them last month when Ethan lost his job at the factory. The money I had taken from my savings because my daughter-in-law begged me through tears to help them with the rent. Ethan came closer and put his hand on my shoulder with a familiarity that no longer comforted me. "Mom, don't get like this. It's just paint. Plus, we've already talked to an architect. We can divide the house into 2 parts. You'll have your space and we'll have ours. Like one big happy family." One big happy family. The words sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty room. I looked at my wrinkled curtains on the floor, the ones I had sewn myself with fabric I bought at the market after 3 weeks of saving my tips. I looked at the growing paint stain on my dresser, the one I had found at a garage sale and sanded and varnished for 2 whole weekends. "And who decided this?" I asked, my voice starting to get some strength back. "When did you sit down and plan the future of my house without consulting me?" Ava sighed dramatically and put away her phone. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. You always get so difficult when we try to do something nice. Look at this ugly color you had. White's going to look beautiful. You'll see." "Beautiful for whom?" I wanted to scream. I'd chosen that peach color. After days of comparing samples at the paint store, it reminded me of the sunsets I used to watch from the window of my old rented room when I dreamed of having my own walls that I could paint any color I wanted. The painters kept working, pretending not to hear our argument, but I felt their uncomfortable glances every time we raised our voices. The younger one had paint splotches even in his hair, and I wondered how much they were being paid for this last-minute job. Ethan walked around the room like an inspector checking his property. "Mom, look, it's going to be so much brighter. And when we bring our furniture in, you'll see what a huge difference it makes." Ava already found a beautiful bedroom set on sale. Their furniture in my room, in the space I had filled with my own things, each with its own story, each bought with the sweat of my hands wrinkled by the detergents from the restaurant kitchen. Ava went over to the vanity where I kept my cheap perfumes and my creams for dry hands. "Oh, and all this mess we can organize better. You don't need so many things, Mom. When you get older, you have to start simplifying your life. Simplify my life." As if my little treasures were trash cluttering up their plans, as if my 67 years had turned me into an annoying tenant in my own house. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just the fresh paint covering my beloved walls, or the furniture moved without my permission. It was the way they had decided my future so naturally, as if I were an old piece of furniture that had to be put in the least visible corner. And just like that, everything started to crumble. But let me tell you how we got here, so you understand why. That afternoon, watching those strangers paint my sanctuary, I knew it was time to defend myself, even if it meant losing the only family I had left. My name is Grace Miller, and I am 67 years old. For the last 15 years, I have worked in the kitchen of the cookery, a place where families go to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations while I sweat behind the stoves preparing their favorite dishes. I get there at 5 in the morning to prepare the chicken stock that simmers for hours, and I leave at 7 at night with my uniform soaked in grease and my hair smelling of fried onions. Before the cookery, I worked in 3 other restaurants, always in the kitchen, always invisible to the customers who enjoyed my food without knowing who prepared it. My hands are marked with small scars from hot pans and knives that slipped when I was rushing during peak hours. My nails, which I once kept painted pink, I now keep short and unpolished because it's more sanitary for handling food. I was widowed 12 years ago. Daniel died of a heart attack while watching television on a Sunday afternoon. A good man who worked his whole life in a furniture factory and left me with more beautiful memories than money in the bank. After his funeral, I stayed in the apartment we'd been renting since we got married, paying $550 a month to a landlord who raised the rent every year without improving a single thing. Ethan was different when he was a boy. A shy kid who would hug me when I got home from work tired and helped me fold the laundry while he told me about his day at school. But something changed when he met Ava. She came into his life like a hurricane, full of big plans and expensive dreams. She talked about trips to Europe, new cars, and houses in fancy neighborhoods where important people lived. At first, I thought it was good that my son had an ambitious woman beside him. Daniel had always been content, happy with little, and I was afraid Ethan had inherited that same tranquility that was sometimes confused with a lack of ambition. But I soon discovered that Ava's dreams came with a price that others had to pay. When they got married, I lent them $1,000 for the party, money I had saved penny by penny, keeping it in a cookie tin because I didn't trust banks. They promised to pay me back in 6 months. That was 8 years ago. When their first child was born, they asked me for another $800 for hospital expenses. When the second one came, they needed $100 to buy a used crib and stroller. There was always an emergency. Always a promise to pay me back soon. I never asked them for the money. A mother doesn't charge her son interest, I would tell myself. But deep down, I knew my generosity had become their convenience. It was easier to ask Mom than to find extra jobs or live with fewer luxuries. Working in a restaurant teaches you to be strong. When the chef yells at you because Adish took 2 extra minutes. When the servers blame you because a customer complained about the temperature of the soup. When your swollen feet are begging for a break, but you have 5 hours left in your shift, you learn that noon is going to defend you if you don't defend yourself first. You also learn the value of money. Every dollar they paid me represented half an hour of standing in front of a hot grill, or washing huge pots with water so hot it made my hands red up to my elbows. That's why I saved everything I could. A few dollars from weekend tips when I worked overtime on holidays. $50 when the restaurant had a special event and we got bonuses. I lived on the bare minimum. Secondhand clothes, simple food I cooked at home, entertainment limited to free television shows. On Sundays, my only day off, I would walk around the flea market looking for useful and cheap things. That's where I found my dresser for $30, the one that now had white paint stains on top of it. After Daniel's death, loneliness became my constant companion. I would get home from work tired, and there was no one waiting for me with a hot cup of tea or asking me how my day was. Weekends felt endless. Ethan would visit every now and then, always with Ava and the kids, but their visits felt more like inspections. They would check my refrigerator, comment on how small the apartment was, suggest that it was time for me to think about moving into a senior living community. A senior living community. as if being 67 years old had automatically turned me into someone incapable of making my own decisions. As if working 40 hours a week in a commercial kitchen was something a frail or senile person would do. Ava had a special way of making me feel old and out of date. She would talk about phone apps I didn't understand, trendy places she'd eaten, important people she had met at Ethan's job. She always ended her stories with a condescending smile and a pat on my hand. "Oh, Mom, what would you know about these modern things?" But I knew things she didn't know. I knew how to make a $1,200 a month paycheck stretch for 30 whole days. I knew how to get stubborn stains out of clothes and how to repair broken appliances with patience and ingenuity. I knew how to work 12 hours straight without complaining and how to save money, even when it felt impossible. For years, my dream had been to own my own home, not something big or luxurious, just a place where I could paint the walls any color I wanted, where I could plant flowers in the garden, where I could invite my friends from work over for coffee without asking a landlord for permission, a place that was completely mine, where no one could tell me they were raising the rent or that I had to move out. That dream became more urgent after the new owner of my building decided to renovate all the apartments. We had 3 months to vacate or accept a rent increase of $280 a month. For me, that $200 represented the difference between living decently and counting every penny to make it to the end of the month. It was then that I made the decision that would change everything. For 30 years, I had been secretly saving money. Not just the money Ethan and Ava knew I had, but extra money. Money I had saved coin by coin, bill by bill, hidden in places no one else knew about. Under the mattress was a plastic bag with $1 bills. Inside an empty coffee can at the bottom of the closet, I kept all the extra weekend tips. In the hem of my Sunday best dress, the one I wore for special occasions, I had sewn $500 in $50 bills. When I counted it all, I had $3,800, a fortune for someone who earned $200 a week, money that represented years of not buying myself new shoes, of cooking at home instead of ordering out, of walking instead of taking the bus when the weather allowed. Every bill had asterisk of sacrifice behind it. The day I decided to look for a house was a Tuesday morning. I had woken up with a strange resolve, as if something inside me had awakened after years of being asleep. I got dressed in my best clothes, counted my money one more time, and went out to tour neighborhoods where houses were within my budget. The first house I saw was in a quiet neighborhood 40 minutes by bus from the restaurant. It was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a backyard about the size of a dining room table. The exterior paint was peeling, the windows needed work, and the front yard was more weeds than grass. But it had something that made me fall in love with it immediately. A big window in the master bedroom faced east, perfect for watching the sunrise. The real estate agent, a young man in a fancy suit with a salesman's smile, looked me up and down when I said I was interested. "Ma'am, this property costs $35,000. Are you pre-approved for a mortgage?" "I don't need a loan," I replied. "I can pay in cash." His expression changed completely. Suddenly, I was no longer an old woman wasting his time, but a serious buyer. He showed me every corner of the house, explaining the advantages of each room as if it were a palace. The kitchen has enough space for a small table. The bathroom was renovated 5 years ago. The electrical system is in good condition. But I had already made up my mind from the moment I saw that window. For years, I had woken up in dark rooms in apartments where sunlight barely filtered through taller buildings. Here I could have my morning coffee watching the day be born. I could have plants on the windowsill. I could feel alive instead of just going through the motions. That same afternoon, I made an offer of $30,000. The seller accepted immediately. According to the agent, they had been trying to sell the house for 8 months without success. The neighborhood wasn't fancy enough for buyers with more money, but it also wasn't cheap enough for buyers with no savings. It was perfect for someone like me. The legal paperwork took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which I didn't tell anyone. Not Ethan, not Ava, not even Olivia, my coworker, who was the closest thing to a friend I had. Every night after getting home from the restaurant, I would sit and imagine what it would be like to live in my own house, what color I would paint the walls, where I would put my few pieces of furniture, how I would organize the kitchen so it would be perfect for cooking just for me. The day I signed the final papers, my hands were shaking, not from nerves but from excitement. At 65 years old, for the first time in my life, I was going to have something that was completely mine, something no one could take away, where no one could raise the rent or tell me what I could or couldn't do. When I received the keys, I stood in front of the door for several minutes before opening it. Once I stepped inside, I would no longer be the same Grace who'd lived her whole life adapting to other people's spaces. I would be Grace the homeowner, Grace the house owner, Grace who had achieved something that many people with better jobs and more education hadn't managed to do. The house was empty and smelled of damp air, but it was mine. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, testing the light switches, opening and closing the windows. In the master bedroom, I stood in front of that window I had liked so much and smiled for the first time in months. That night, I slept on the floor of my new house, wrapped in a blanket I had brought from the rented apartment. I didn't have any furniture yet, but I had something better. I had the certainty that every inch of that place belonged to me. The problem started when I decided to tell Ethan and Ava. I invited them to dinner the following Sunday. I cooked their favorite dish, chicken mole, which took me 3 hours to prepare, and set the table with my nicest plates. I wanted it to be a celebration, a special occasion where I would share my achievement with the only people I considered family. Ethan arrived in a bad mood. He had lost his job at the factory the week before for being late repeatedly, and he was frustrated because his job interviews weren't going well. Ava arrived complaining about the traffic, the heat, and how the kids had been unbearable all week. I waited until after dessert to give them the news. "I have something important to tell you," I said, trying to sound casual but excited. Ava sighed. "Oh, Mom, I hope you're not about to get sentimental. We have enough problems of our own." "No, it's not that. It's something good. I bought a house." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it. Ethan paused his fork halfway to his mouth. Ava looked at me as if I had announced I was going to marry an extraterrestrial. "You bought a house?" Ethan asked finally. "A small place in the St. Vincent neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, a yard. It's perfect for me." Ava straightened up in her chair. "With what money? Where did you get $30,000? "I had been saving for years," I explained. "Money from my job, tips, small amounts that I had been putting away." Ava's expression changed from surprise to something I couldn't immediately identify. It was a mix of anger and disappointment, as if my independence were a personal betrayal to her. "Mom, why didn't you tell us anything?" Ethan asked. "We could have helped you find something better, a place closer to the city, safer." I didn't need help. I already found what I wanted. Ava got up from the table abruptly. "This is unbelievable. We're over here struggling to pay rent, borrowing money for the kids' expenses, and you had thousands of dollars tucked away this whole time." "They weren't hidden. They were saved." "It's the same thing," Ava yelled. "Do you know how many times we've needed money? How many times we've had to borrow pennies from you when you had a fortune stashed away?" Ethan tried to calm her down, but I could see in his eyes that he thought the same thing. For them, my money had always been a resource available for their emergencies. The idea that I had my own goals, my own dreams, hadn't crossed their minds. "Besides," Ava continued, "you're not so young anymore to live alone. What's going to happen if you get sick? If you fall and there's no one to help you?" "I'm perfectly fine," I replied. "I work 8 hours a day. I handle my own affairs. I don't need supervision." But Ava had already found her argument. The seed she planted that night would grow into the justification for everything that would happen later. "Mom, at this age you have to be practical. It would be smarter if you sold that house and came to live with us. We could use the money to buy a bigger home where we all fit comfortably." There it was. Not 10 minutes had passed since they learned of my accomplishment, and they were already plotting how to take advantage of it. Moving into my new house took 3 full weekends. Since I didn't have money to hire a moving company, I had to transport my belongings little by little on the public bus. Each trip, I would carry 2 large bags full of clothes, books, and the small treasures I had accumulated over the years. The bus drivers knew me by then, and some of them would even help me lift the heavier bags. The hardest part was moving my small refrigerator and my washing machine. For that, I had to ask for help from Tyler, Olivia's brother, who had an old but functional pickup truck. I paid him $50 for the favor, money he needed more than I did, but it represented my independence. Seeing my appliances in my own kitchen was worth every penny. My first few months in the house were the happiest I remembered living. I woke up every morning with the sun coming in through my favorite window. And before I got up, I would stay for a few minutes enjoying the silence that was completely mine. There were no neighbors arguing on the other side of thin walls, no heavy footsteps on the floor above, no loud music at midnight. After work, instead of arriving at an apartment that smelled like other tenants' food, I would arrive at a house that smelled like the scented candles I would buy myself every now and then as a personal gift. I had planted flowers in the front yard, purple petunias and white daisies that I bought on sale at the local nursery. I didn't know much about gardening, but I learned by watching videos at the public library on Sundays. The kitchen was my favorite place. It was small, but perfectly organized according to my needs. Every pot had its place. Every knife was exactly where I needed it. After years of working in chaotic commercial kitchens, having an orderly and quiet space to prepare my own food was an indescribable luxury. On weekends, I dedicated myself to improving the house with the money I had left over from my paycheck. I bought paint on sale and painted the living room a soft yellow that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. I painted the bathroom a mint green I had seen in a magazine someone had forgotten at the restaurant. Each can of paint cost $12, but it completely transformed the atmosphere of each room. I learned to fix things by watching internet tutorials at the library. When the faucet in the sink broke, instead of calling a plumber, who would have charged me $100, I bought the necessary parts for $15 and fixed it myself. When one of the windows wouldn't close properly, I sanded down the swollen wood and adjusted it until it worked perfectly. Ethan and Ava came to visit me twice during the first few months. Both times they arrived with a critical attitude that dampened my joy. The first visit was 3 weeks after I moved in. They dropped by without warning on a Saturday afternoon while I was in the yard planting bright red geraniums. "Mom, this area looks a little rough," was the first thing Ethan said when he got out of the car. "Some fences are broken, and a few yards are overrun with weeds." Ava walked through the house with a pinched look, brushing her fingers along the freshly painted walls as if they were flimsy cardboard. "This kitchen is way too small. Where will you put everything when you've guests? And this bathroom needs a total redo. The tile looks ancient. I liked my bathroom. The tile was from the 70s, but it was spotless, and I had cleaned it until it shined. The towels I'd bought on sale matched the green walls perfectly." The second visit was worse. They arrived during a heavy rain and found a small leak in the guest room ceiling. Instead of offering to help fix it, Ava took the opportunity to rattle off a list of everything wrong with the house. "Look at this, Mom. This place is falling apart. See that moisture stain? It'll spread until the wood rots, and these old windows don't insulate at all. Your electric bills will skyrocket in winter." Ethan chimed in with an exaggerated concern for my safety. "Mom, this neighborhood isn't safe for an older woman living alone. The corner house has broken windows, and there are area-abandoned cars on a few streets. What will you do if someone breaks in?" "Those are the same worries anywhere," I replied. "And here, at least, I own my space." But their words planted a seed of doubt that sprouted every time I heard a strange noise at night. Every time I saw a neighbor who left trash in the yard, every time I had to repair something else in the house. The maintenance costs were constant but doable. $20 to replace a pipe that started to drip. For materials so I could patch the roof leak myself. $40 to hire an electrician to check an outlet that had started sparking. Every expense stung, not because I lacked the money, but because it chipped away at savings that had taken years to build. But for every dollar I spent on repairs, I saved more by not paying rent. My monthly costs fell from $850 rent plus utilities in the apartment to about $450, just utilities and maintenance. That extra $400 each month gave me a sense of security I had never known. With that cushion, I could buy things I once thought out of reach. A new TV to replace Daniel's old one with the scratched screen. a set of quality sheets that wouldn't fray after 3 washes, a small coffee maker so I could have fresh brewed coffee instead of instant. I also started inviting Olivia over for Sunday lunch. She was a widow too, living in a small apartment with her older sister, and she appreciated a quiet place to talk without interruptions. We would cook together, chat about our jobs, our aches and pains, and the shows we liked. It was the first time in years I'd had a real friendship, not just work camaraderie. Olivia helped me name what Ethan and Ava were doing, financial abuse. "Oh, Grace," she told me one Sunday while we dried dishes, "your kids treat you like a piggy bank with legs. Whenever they need cash, they just crack the glass and take what they want." Her words hurt because I knew they were true. For years, I'd justified their constant requests as legitimate needs. The kids needed clothes, the car broke down, surprise medical bills. But with some distance, the pattern became clear. They never paid me back. They never invited me out to repay all the meals I'd covered. They never brought gifts for me birthday or Mother's Day. Yet they expected me to be generous at their birthdays and at Christmas. I also noticed something more troubling. Their visits became steadier, and each time they came, the criticism about my house and my decision to live alone got louder. Ava kept poking at my age and my ability to care for myself. "Mom, yesterday my friend Rose said her mother fell and lay on the floor for 3 hours before anyone found her. What would you do if that happened to you?" Rose was Ava's neighbor, 85 years old with balance issues. I was 67 and worked 8 hours a day on my feet in a commercial kitchen. The comparison was ridiculous, but Ava repeated it every visit. Ethan started making more direct pitches to sell the house. "Mom, if you sold right now, you could easily get $40,000. Prices have climbed since you bought. With that, we could buy a bigger place for all of us." All of us, as if my comfort were secondary. The real pressure started when Ethan lost his second job in 6 months. After 8 months in my home, I decided to host a small celebration to show friends and family what I'd accomplished. It wasn't a big party, just a Sunday lunch for the people who mattered. I invited Olivia and her sister Lillian, Vincent the electrician who'd helped with repairs and become a good friend, Ethan and Ava with the kids, and Natalie, my cousin across town who hadn't seen the house yet. I spent 2 weeks getting ready. I cleaned until every surface shined. I planted new flowers in the front yard and even had a small crack in the exterior wall repaired. I wanted everything to look perfect. The menu was planned with the same care I gave special banquets at the restaurant. Red mole with chicken started the day before. Rice and beans simmered for hours. Hand-pressed tortillas I made that morning. And for dessert, tres leches cake, my specialty. I spent $10 on ingredients, more than usual for 2 weeks of food, but it was worth it for the occasion. I set the table with white sail tablecloths, plates that matched even if they weren't the same set, and fresh garden flowers in a garage sale vase. It wasn't fancy like the tables Ava posted from pricey restaurants with her friends, but it had something those tables never would. It was entirely mine. Olivia and Lillian arrived first, carrying a tray of empanadas they'd made. Vincent showed up with a bottle of cheap but decent wine and a small bag with herb pots for my garden. Natalie rolled in half an hour late with a huge smile and a hug that lasted forever. "Cousin, this place is beautiful," she said, walking room to room, admiring every detail. "I can't believe it's yours. Remember when we were kids playing house under Grandma's table? You swore you'd have a home with a flower garden." I remembered. It had been my dream since I was 8, watering Grandma's plants as she promised I'd have a garden someday. Almost 60 years later, I finally did. The food came out perfect. The mole had that sweet heat balance I'd spent years dialing in. The rice was fluffy, the tortillas hot and soft. My guests ate like people who love real home cooking, not out of obligation, but with joy. Vincent praised my seasoning. "Grace, this mole beats my mom's, and that's saying something. Every time I taste your food, I remember why I picked electrical work over the kitchen." Olivia raised her soda for a toast. "To Grace, who proves it's never too late to chase a dream, and that a strong woman can do anything she decides." Everyone toasted and applauded. Pride filled my eyes with tears. It was the first time in my life anyone publicly recognized what I'd achieved. At the restaurant, when I cooked for 200, the chef took all the credit. In my marriage, Daniel was a good man, but not one for praise. This moment felt completely new. Ethan and Ava showed up an hour late, just as dessert was being served. They tossed out a quick apology about traffic and took the chairs I'd saved for them, but their chill demeanor clashed with the warmth we'd built. Ava greeted everyone with polite smiles and surface compliments about the table, but I knew her well enough to see the critical looks, the way she touched the tablecloths as if testing quality, how she checked the plates for flaws, how she eyed the garden flowers like they were ordinary. Ethan ate in silence, answering with monosyllables when anyone asked about his job or the kids. The children, restless from the car ride, sprinted through the house touching everything while their parents set no limits. Natalie, who didn't know Ethan and Ava well, tried to loop them in. "You must be so proud of Grace. Not everyone can save like that and buy a home at 65. Ava smiled with that performative smile she used when she wanted to seem pleasant but was irked. "Yes, of course, though we wish she'd consulted us. At her age, living alone can be risky." The remark dropped like a stone into the celebration. Vincent, who knew how capable I was after watching me fix things around the house, frowned. "Excuse me, but Grace is one of the most independent people I know. She works harder than folks half her age." Ava straightened, taking it as a challenge. "Well, you don't know the whole situation. We're the family. We know what's best for her." Olivia set her fork down a little hard. "And what exactly is best? That she live where there's support so she isn't alone if something happens? This neighborhood seems perfectly fine to me." Lillian, blunt and allergic to diplomacy, jumped in. "Grace looks fully capable of handling her life, and this house is in great shape." Ethan finally spoke, worse than silence. "You don't get it. Mom spent all her savings on this house, money she could have used for her future. If she gets sick or needs care, how will she pay?" "I have health insurance," I said, feeling my joy evaporate like water in a hot pan. "And I have a job. I'm not an invalid." But Ava had found her rhythm. "Don't be offended, Mom, but you shouldn't be lifting heavy pots or standing for hours. One of these days you'll get hurt. Then what are we supposed to do?" Vincent stood, clearly uncomfortable. "Grace, thank you for the meal and the kindness. Everything was excellent, but I should go." Natalie rose too, and before leaving, whispered in my ear, "Don't let anyone take what you fought for. This house is yours. Your life is yours." Olivia and Lillian left soon after. At the door, Olivia squeezed my hand. "If you need anything, call me. You're not alone." When it was just Ethan, Ava, the kids, and me, the air turned heavy like a storm cloud. Ava got up to wash dishes without being asked, but she slammed things around, making her mood obvious. "Mom, we need to talk," Ethan said after the kids ran into the yard. I sat on my favorite couch, the one I'd bought on a 3-month plan, waiting for it. Ava dried her hands and sat across from me, arms crossed. "Mom, let's be honest. This can't continue." "What can't?" "You living alone, pouring money into a house that's too big for you while we're barely getting by." There it was. Their real issue wasn't my safety or my well-being. It was that I had something they wanted and couldn't have. Ethan moved closer and sat on the arm of my chair, using that physical closeness he knew unsettled me, to press his point. "What if we sell this place and buy a bigger home we can all share? You'd have your own room company, and we'd help with bills and maintenance." Sell, as if the house belonged to the 3 of us instead of just me. "I don't want to sell my house," I said in the firmest voice I could manage. Ava sighed, performing exasperation. "Be practical, Mom. With what this house is worth, plus what we can pitch in, we could buy something much better in a nicer, safer neighborhood." "This house is perfect for me." "But not for us," Ava murmured so softly I barely heard her. That evening after they left, I sat in my garden and replayed what had happened. My moment of celebration had been spoiled by the greed of the 2 people who were supposed to love me most in the world. But I had also learned something important. I had true friends who respected my decisions and valued my independence. The real fight had just begun. 3 weeks after the lunch, Ethan lost his job at the insurance company. It was the third job he had lost in 2 years. Always for the same reason: lateness, unjustified absences, and an attitude his bosses described as unprofessional. But according to him, all his bosses had been unfair. All his coworkers were jealous, and the world was conspiring against him. The call came on a Tuesday night when I had just gotten home from the restaurant and was soaking my swollen feet in warm salt water. Ethan sounded desperate on the phone, like a child who had broken something valuable and needed his mom to fix it. "Mom, I got fired today. My boss says it's because I was late 3 times this month, but it's not fair. Traffic is impossible and I'm having car trouble. What are you going to do now?" I asked, even though I already knew where the conversation was going. "I don't know, Mom. Rent's due next week and I have nothing. The kids need school supplies and Ava says we'll get kicked out if we don't pay." I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, that mix of guilt and resentment I always got when Ethan had money problems. As a mother, my instinct was to protect him, help him, solve his problems. But as a woman who had worked her whole life to get stability, it bothered me that at 35 years old, he still expected me to be his financial lifeline. "Ethan, you need to find another job quickly. Plenty of places are hiring." "I know, Mom, but meantime I need help." "Can you cover rent?" "It's $800. I'll pay you back once I'm working." $800, almost 2 months of my house maintenance expenses. Money I had earned during a full week of work at the restaurant, waking up at 5 a.m. and getting home at 8 p.m. with burned hands and an aching back. "Ethan, I've already lent you a lot of money this year. You need to learn to manage your expenses." "Mom, please. It's an emergency." "Do you want my kids out on the street?" The emotional manipulation that always worked. The grandmother guilt that couldn't stand the idea of her grandchildren suffering for their parents' mistakes. But this time, sitting in my own house, surrounded by things I had bought with my own effort, something inside me pushed back. "Your children won't be on the street. You're going to find a way to solve your problem like the adult you are." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. When Ethan spoke again, his voice had a tone I had never heard before, cold and calculating. "Okay, Mom, I get it. I see what your priorities are now." "What do you mean by that?" "Since you bought that house, you've gotten selfish. Before, you always helped us. Now that you have your little palace, you forgot about family." The words hurt like a slap. Selfish for wanting to keep the money I had earned with my work. Selfish for having fulfilled a dream that had taken me decades to achieve. Selfish for not wanting to continue being the personal bank for my grown children. "I'm not selfish, Ethan. I'm a woman who worked her whole life to have a little security in her old age." "Mom, you're 67. What do you need all that money for? What do you need such a big house for? It'd be smarter to sell and come live with us. With that money, we could buy something better for everyone." There it was again, the same proposal they had been making since I bought the house, but now with more urgency because they needed money immediately. "I'm not selling my house, Ethan." "But you're wasting it on silly things. Ava said you bought new plants. What good are plants when your son doesn't have a job?" "What good were plants?" As if beauty, joy, the pride of owning something weren't worth anything. As if the only purpose of my money was to solve the problems they created with their bad decisions. "My plants cost $10. Your rent is $800. That's not the same." The conversation ended with Ethan hanging up on me, something he had never done before. I was left with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone, feeling that something important had changed between us forever. 2 days later, they showed up at my house without warning. It was Friday afternoon. I had just gotten home from work and was changing my uniform when I heard a knock at the door. I thought it was Vincent, who sometimes came by to see if I needed help with anything. But when I opened it, I found Ethan, Ava, and the 2 kids standing on my porch. "Surprise," Ava said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We came to visit." They walked in without waiting for an invitation. The kids running straight to the backyard, Ethan carrying a small bag, and Ava with that proprietary attitude that made me nervous. "What's in the bag?" I asked. Well, Mom, since you wouldn't help with money, the landlord gave us 3 days to vacate. So we're going to stay with you while we look for something cheaper. My heart stopped. Stay with me. In my house, the refuge I had worked so hard to get. No, I said immediately. You can't stay here. Ava sat on my couch as if she hadn't heard me. Why not? You've got 2 bedrooms and we're family. It's the least you can do after refusing to help. Because this is my house. And I decide who lives here. Ethan put the bag on the floor and looked at me with that performative disappointment he'd used to manipulate me since he was a teenager. Mom, are you really going to leave us on the street? Your own grandkids? I'm not leaving you on the street. You made choices that led to this. You can find another apartment. You can ask Ava's family for help. You can do 1,000 things before invading my space. Ava stood with a dramatic flourish. Invading your space? Listen to how she talks to her own family. We've always taken care of her, always been there. When have you taken care of me? When have you been there for me? I'm the one who's always helped you. Oh, Mom, don't exaggerate. Don't you remember when you had the flu last year and Ethan went to buy medicine? One time, just one time, in 12 years of being a widow, Ethan had gone to the pharmacy for me when I had a high fever, and I remembered it because it was so rare it surprised me. That's not enough to justify taking over my house. Ethan came up to me with that condescending smile I hated. Mom, don't be dramatic. We're not taking over. We just need a place for a few weeks while we find something permanent. A few weeks that would turn into months and months into years. I knew it because I knew them. Once they settled in, it would be impossible to get them out. They would start talking about dividing expenses, making updates to fit the whole family, how convenient it was for everyone to live together. The answer is no. You can't stay here even one night. Ava switched from pleading to direct attack. Fine, Mom. We see who you are now. But don't forget, when you're old and need someone to care for you, you'll remember this. Are you threatening me? Not a threat, just reality. Families should help each other, but you only think about yourself. Thinking about myself, as if it were a crime after 67 years of putting others first. First my parents, then Daniel, then Ethan, and now finally me. They left that night, but not before Ava made one last remark that chilled me. Mom, this house is too big for you alone, and the neighborhood isn't safe. One day you'll need care, and I hope we have the heart to do it after how you treated us. That night I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from fear. For the first time since I bought the house, I felt that my refuge was threatened. I knew Ethan and Ava well enough to know they wouldn't give up easily. If they couldn't get my money with tears, they would try with pressure. If they couldn't convince me with words, they would look for other ways. I got up several times to check that all the doors were locked. The battle had officially begun. The first sign something was wrong was the sound of keys in my lock on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the familiar metallic jingle, followed by my front door opening. But it was impossible. I had the only keys to my house. I came out of the kitchen with the coffee cup in my hand, expecting a neighbor with an emergency, or maybe Vincent stopping by to check on something. Instead, I found Ethan standing in my living room, smiling as if he had every right to be there. Morning, Mom. I came early to talk. How did you get in? My voice came out higher than normal. Oh, Ava had a copy of your keys made last time we visited. She said it was for safety, if something happened and we needed to get in. I stood there frozen, the coffee cup trembling in my hands. They had violated my privacy in the most basic way. They had taken my keys and my permission, made a copy without asking, and now they were entering my house as if it were theirs. Give me those keys back, now. Ethan sat on my couch, crossed his arms, and looked at me with that condescending patience he used when he thought I was being irrational. Mom, don't get worked up. The keys are for your safety. What if you fall and can't reach the door? What if there's a medical emergency? I don't need anyone else to have keys to my house. This is my private property. Well, that's what I came to discuss. Ava and I think it's time to make some changes here. What kind of changes? Ethan stood and started walking around the living room as if inspecting something he planned to buy. This place has potential, but it needs modernizing. The guest room can be for the kids. The living room is big enough to split with a play area. And your bedroom, well, it's too big for one person. My bedroom, the sanctuary I had created with such care, with my floral curtains, my peach-colored walls, my perfect window for watching the sunrise. You're not touching my bedroom. Mom, be reasonable. There are 4 of us and 1 of you. It's only logical that the space should be distributed according to each family's needs. Each family, as if he and I were separate families with equal rights to my property. This conversation is over, Ethan. I want you to leave my house right now. Instead of getting up, he sank back more comfortably on the couch. Mom, I'm not leaving. Ava and the kids are coming in an hour with some of our stuff. We've already decided we're moving in while we look for something bigger and more suitable for everyone. I'm calling the police. Ethan laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who knew something I didn't. And what are you going to tell them? That your son came to visit you at your house? I've got keys. I'm family, and I'm not doing anything illegal. You came in without my permission. I have keys. That implies permission. I realized he had planned everything carefully. It wasn't an impulsive decision born of desperation. It was a calculated plan to take over my house in a way that would be difficult to fight legally. When I've arrived with the kids and 3 large suitcases, I had already called the police. But Ethan was right. There wasn't much they could do. The officer who came, a young man who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation, explained that family property disputes were complicated. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but your son has keys to the house and says you gave them permission to stay. Unless you have some document that proves otherwise, this is considered a civil conflict, not a criminal one. Document. What document would I have? Who imagines they need a written contract to prevent their own family from invading their house? Ava had settled into my kitchen and was already preparing food as if she were the owner. The kids were running all over the house, touching my things, moving my furniture, treating my space as if it were a theme park. Ethan had brought his big television into the living room and was connecting it without asking me if he could move my small television. That first night, I slept with my bedroom door locked, listening to strange noises in my own house, low conversations in the living room, footsteps in the hallway, the sound of the television late into the night. My refuge had become a boarding house where I was the only one who hadn't chosen to be there. On the second day, I came home from work to find they had moved all my living room furniture. My favorite couch was pushed into a corner against the window. My coffee table had been replaced by a bigger one they had brought, and my plants had been moved to the backyard to make more space. On the third day, Ava had completely reorganized my kitchen. My pots were stored in cabinets I couldn't reach without climbing on a chair. My spices had been replaced by more expensive brands she preferred. My coffee maker had disappeared, replaced by a complicated espresso machine I didn't know how to use. On the fourth day, I found painters in my bedroom. When I got there and saw those men covering my peach-colored walls with white paint, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just the paint. It was the sheer arrogance of thinking they could change my most intimate space without even consulting me. Ethan explained the situation as if he were doing something perfectly reasonable. Mom, we decided this room is too big for you. The kids need more space, and besides, this is going to be the master bedroom of the house. You can use the small bedroom, which is more appropriate for your needs anyway. The small bedroom was what they had called the guest room. It didn't have the big window I liked so much. It didn't have the spacious closet where I kept my clothes. It didn't have the connection to the main bathroom that made my mornings easier when I was rushing to get to work. Ava came in with a triumphant smile. Mom, you're going to see what a beautiful change this is. This white will make the room look bigger and more modern. And we've already ordered new furniture. A full bedroom set that's going to look amazing. With what money did you buy furniture? Ethan exchanged a glance with Ava before answering. Well, since we'll live here now, we thought it was logical to use part of your savings for improvements that benefit the whole family. My savings. They had found my money. Somehow, during those 4 days, they had discovered where I kept my emergency reserves and had decided it was family money. How much did you take? Just $2,000 for the bedroom furniture and some improvements for the house. Don't worry, it's an investment. Once we sell the house, it's going to be worth much more. When we sell the house, it was no longer if they would sell the house, but when. That night, after the humiliation of finding painters in my bedroom, after discovering they had stolen my money, after seeing how they had turned my home into their personal project, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this continue. I sat in what they had designated as my new room and took out my phone. First, I called Vincent to ask him for the name of the lawyer he had used when he bought his house. Then, I called the bank to report unauthorized access to my accounts. Finally, I looked in the directory for the number of a locksmith who worked 24-hour emergency service. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they didn't know who they were messing with. A woman who had worked for decades in kitchens where men thought they could intimidate her, where shouting bosses thought they could trample her, where every day was a battle to maintain dignity and respect. A woman who had learned that sometimes you have to fight for what is yours, no matter if the enemy is your own flesh and blood. The white paint was dripping onto my lacquered dresser, but it no longer hurt me to see it. It was evidence, proof of how far they were willing to go to steal what had cost Meso much to get. Tomorrow I was going to show them they had gravely underestimated Grace Miller. That night I waited until the whole house was silent. I listened as Ethan and Ava stopped whispering in what they now considered their bedroom. I waited for the children to fall asleep in the living room, where they had put inflatable mattresses. When all that could be heard was the ticking of the kitchen clock, I came out of my small bedroom with my shoes in my hand. For the last 4 nights, I had been observing and documenting everything. Every change they made without my permission, everything they moved, every decision they made as if they were the owners. I had taken photos with my old phone, photos that showed my belongings pushed into a corner, my plants thrown into the yard, the fresh paint covering my beloved walls. I left the house through the back door, the one that led to the garden where I had planted my flowers with so much love. The locksmith had told me he would arrive at 5 in the morning, an hour before I had to leave for work. Everything had to be ready before Ethan and Ava woke up. At 5 like sharp, an older man in a small truck arrived without making a sound. Vincent had recommended his brother-in-law, Mark, someone trustworthy who understood delicate situations. I explained the situation to him while he examined my locks. "Ma'am, Grace, this is more common than you can imagine. Families often take advantage of older people, assuming they won't defend themselves, but you are doing the right thing." Mark worked quickly and silently. He changed the front door lock, the lock on the garden gate, and even put a new latch on the back door. He gave me 3 sets of new keys, one for me, one spare to hide in a safe deposit box that Vincent would keep, and one more that I would keep in my work bag. When Mark left, I went to work as if it were a normal day. But during my whole shift at the restaurant, my heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I knew that in a few hours, Ethan and Ava would discover they could no longer get into my house. The moment came at 2 in the afternoon. I was prepping vegetables for the dinner rush when my phone started to ring. "Ethan." I let it ring until it stopped. It rang again immediately. This time, Ava. I didn't answer that either. The text messages started coming in one after another. "Mom, why did you change the locks?" "Mom, this is ridiculous. Open the door." "Mom, we have all our stuff inside. The kids need their toys. This is kidnapping. We're calling the police." The chef noticed I was distracted and asked if I felt okay. I told him I was having some family problems, but that I could keep working. I needed to maintain my normal routine to show that I was still the same responsible, hard-working Grace I had always been. At 3:30, a message came that made me smile for the first time in days. The police said that since it's your house, you can change the locks whenever you want. Perfect. Everything was going according to my plan. When I got home that afternoon, I found the whole family sitting on my front porch. The kids were playing on electronic tablets. Ethan was pacing back and forth talking on the phone, and Ava was looking at me with a rage that could have set my garden on fire. "Mom, open that door immediately." Ethan yelled as soon as he saw me. No? What do you mean no? Our stuff is in there. Your stuff shouldn't be in there. I never gave you permission to move into my house. Ava got up from the step where she was sitting with her hands on her hips like an indignant queen. Mom, this has gotten beyond ridiculous. We're family. You can't leave us on the street. I'm not leaving you on the street. I'm asking you to leave my house. What's the difference? Ethan came toward me with that intimidating attitude he had perfected over the years. Mom, you're doing something very serious. We're talking about your grandchildren. Are you really going to leave them homeless? Your grandchildren have parents who should provide them with a home. I am not responsible for the bad decisions you two make. For the first time since I had known them, Ethan and Ava were speechless. For years, they had used emotional blackmail to get what they wanted from me. But now, they realized that tactic had lost its power. Vincent arrived in his truck at the perfect moment. I had spoken with him that morning and asked him to come for moral backup, but also to be a witness to everything that happened. Afternoon, Grace. Everything okay here? His presence immediately changed the energy. Ethan and Ava couldn't act like the owners of the situation when there was an outside witness watching. Ava tried to win Vincent's sympathy. Oh, Mr. Vincent, I hope you can talk to my mother-in-law. She's been acting so strange since she bought this house. She kicked us out without warning, and now she won't open the door. Vincent looked at me with a small smile. Ma'am Grace, did these young people have a rental agreement with you? No, I never gave them permission to live here. Then I don't see the problem. This is your property, and you decide who lives here. Ethan was getting more and more desperate. His plan to gradually take over my house was unraveling, and he didn't know how to regain control. Mr. Vincent, you don't understand. My mom is alone. At her age, she shouldn't be living without family nearby. We just want to take care of her. Vincent, who had known independent older people his whole life, including his own mother, who lived alone until she was 85, didn't buy that story. Young men, your mom seems perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She works more hours than plenty of folks half her age. But at that moment, the surprise I had been waiting for all day arrived. A police car parked in front of my house, and the same young officer who had come a few days before when I first called got out. Officer, thanks for coming, I said, walking toward him. Mrs. Miller, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. What's going on here? Before I could answer, Ava ran toward the police officer as if he were her personal savior. Officer, my mother-in-law kicked us out of the house without warning. We have young children and all our things are inside. The officer looked at me with curiosity. Ma'am, is it true these people were living in your house? Yes, but without my permission. They copied my keys without consulting me. They moved in without authorization and started making changes to my property without my consent. The officer took out his notebook and started writing. Is there any rental agreement? Any written agreement? There's no agreement because I never gave them permission to live here. Ethan intervened in a desperate voice. Officer, she's my mom. She can't just kick us out like this. It's inhumane. The officer, who had seen similar cases before, sighed with patience. Sir, the fact that she's your mother doesn't give you automatic rights to her property. If she's the legal owner and there's no rental agreement, she can decide who lives there. But our stuff is inside, Ava insisted. Their things can be collected under supervision, I explained to the officer. I have no problem with that. I just don't want them returning to live here. The officer nodded. That seems reasonable, Mrs. Miller. Would you let them in to collect their belongings and I'll supervise? Of course. And that show an hour later, I watched as they took all the things they had brought to occupy my space out of my house. The new furniture they had bought with my money, the big television, the suitcases, the kids' toys, everything came out the same door through which it had entered without my permission. When they were done, Ava looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. Mom, you're going to regret this. When you're old and alone, you'll remember how you treated us. I'm already old, Ava, and I prefer to be alone than in bad company. Ethan made one last attempt at emotional manipulation. Mom, are you really going to choose a house over your family? I'm not choosing a house over my family. I'm choosing my dignity over abuse. They left that night, but I knew this wasn't over. I knew Ethan and Ava well enough to know they would look for another angle to get what they wanted. I was not mistaken. The payback would come in the morning. The next morning dawned with the sound I had feared most, loud knocking on my front door. It was 6:30. I was just getting dressed for work when I heard authoritative voices on the other side of the door. "Police, open the door, please." My heart stopped. It wasn't the young officer from the day before. These were different voices, more serious, more official. I put on a robe over my restaurant uniform and opened the door with trembling hands. Two officers showed me a search warrant. "Mrs. Miller, we have a warrant. We received complaints that you're illegally retaining belongings that aren't yours." "What belongings?" The officers came in without waiting for more explanations. One of them was carrying a detailed list on a sheet of paper. "According to the complaint, you have furniture, cash, and important documents belonging to Ethan Miller and Ava Smith." Behind the police came Ethan and Ava, both with poorly disguised expressions of triumph. Ava was carrying a folder full of papers as if she had been preparing for this moment for weeks. "Officer, I explained to your colleague yesterday that they moved into my house without permission. I don't have anything that belongs to them." Ethan went up to the main officer with the convincing attitude of a wronged son. "Officer, my mom is confused. She asked us to move in because she felt lonely and scared. We brought furniture and clothes and even paid for improvements." "That's a lie," I said immediately. Ava opened her folder and pulled out several papers. "Officer, here are receipts for the furniture we bought for this house. I also have text messages where my mother-in-law asks us to move in." My blood ran cold. Text messages I had never sent. Receipts for furniture they had bought with my stolen money. They had fabricated false evidence to support their story. The officer examined the documents Ava handed him. "Mrs. Miller, these messages appear to be from your number. Here you say, 'Ethan, come live with me. This house is too big for me alone.'" I never sent those messages. I don't know how they faked them, but I never wrote that. Ethan jumped in with a sad, worried voice. "Officer, my mom's been acting strange. She forgets things. She denies doing things she did. We're worried about her mental health." Mental health? There was the new strategy. If they couldn't get my house through financial means, they'd try to have me declared mentally incompetent. "Officer, I work 40 hours a week in a restaurant. I manage my own finances, pay my bills, and maintain my house. There's nothing wrong with my mental health." But Ava already had her argument prepared. "Officer, the other day she forgot she'd invited us to dinner. Last week she called Ethan 3 times with the same question. Those are signs of early dementia." More lies. Carefully scripted to make me seem like a confused woman who couldn't make decisions. The main officer looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion. "Mrs. Miller, do you have any document proving this house belongs to you exclusively?" "Of course. It's in my bedroom." When I went to get the house papers, I heard Ethan speaking in a low voice with the officers. "She's paranoid. She says we're trying to rob her, that we're conspiring. Typical of senile dementia," he added. I returned with the deed to the house, my identification, and all the documents proving the property was mine and mine alone. The officer reviewed them carefully. "These are in order. The house is registered in your name exclusively." But Ava didn't give up. "Officer, that doesn't change that she invited us to live here and we contributed money. We have tenant rights, even without a written contract." At that moment, my phone rang. It was Vincent. I answered quickly and explained the situation in a few words. He told me he would be there in 5 minutes with the lawyer he had recommended. "Officer, my legal representative is on the way." "Can we wait?" The officer nodded, but Ethan got nervous. "We don't need any lawyer. This is just family business." When Vincent arrived with attorney Michael Jenkins, the whole dynamic changed. The lawyer, a man in his 50s and professionally dressed, immediately asked to see the documents Ava had presented. "Officer, may I review this alleged evidence?" Attorney Jenkins examined the text messages with a loop he took from his briefcase. After several minutes, he looked up with a small smile. "These messages are forged. The metadata gives it away. They were created with a fake text app." The main officer frowned. Are you sure? Completely. Furthermore, officer, presenting false evidence to authorities is a crime. These people could face charges for obstruction of justice. Ava immediately turned pale. I didn't know. Someone else must have. Don't finish that sentence, the lawyer warned. Anything you say can be used against you. Ethan tried one last desperate tactic. Officer, no matter what, my mom needs help. She can't live alone at her age. Attorney Jenkins addressed Ethan directly in a firm voice. Young man, your mother is a competent adult with the right to decide where and how she lives. The fact you disagree doesn't give you license to forge evidence or invade her home. The main officer closed his notebook and addressed Ethan and Ava. Based on what I've seen, you have no legal rights to this property. The texts are fake. There's no valid rental agreement, and Mrs. Miller is clearly competent. But officer, Ava protested. Ma'am, if you continue to harass Mrs. Miller or attempt entry without permission, you'll face trespassing charges. Is that clear? Ethan and Ava left my house that morning defeated and humiliated. But before he left, Ethan looked at me with a coldness I had never seen. Mom, you won this battle, but you're all alone now, completely alone. His words were designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty for choosing my dignity over their manipulation. But for the first time in my life, loneliness didn't scare me. I'm not alone, Ethan. I have true friends, a job I'm proud of, and a home that's entirely mine. I have my self-respect, which I almost lost trying to please you two. After they left, Attorney Jenkins helped me understand my legal options. I could press charges for the fake messages, for the money taken from my savings, and for invading my property. I decided not to, but I asked him to prepare a restraining order to keep them away from my house. That afternoon, when I got home from work, I found my house exactly as I had left it. Quiet, calm, completely mine. I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee, looking at the flowers I had planted with my own hands, breathing the air of my own space. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid someone would come in without permission. I didn't have to listen to criticism about my decisions. I didn't have to justify my expenses or my dreams. Olivia came to visit me that night. She sat with me in the garden and asked how I felt. Free, I replied. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. I learned something important in these months of battle. Sometimes choosing your own happiness means disappointing the people you love. Sometimes defending your dignity means cutting ties with family who see you as a resource rather than a person. Sometimes chosen loneliness is better than toxic company. I still work at the restaurant. I still tend my garden. I still live in my small but perfect house. Ethan and Ava have not contacted me again. And that's okay. Maybe someday when they learn to respect me as the independent person I am, we can rebuild our relationship. But it will be on my terms, not theirs. In the meantime, I am 67 years old. I have my own home, true friends, and the peace that comes from knowing no one can take what I worked so hard to get. Sometimes silence is the most powerful justice of all. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's connect in the comments. If you enjoyed it, a super thanks helps me keep creating more. Thank you for your kind support. I'm excited to read your thoughts. On screen are 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There's much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.